Hello and welcome to another episode of Quick and Nerdy, an MSP-friendly how-to channel dedicated to Veeam-powered BaaS and DRaaS offerings. As always, I'm your host, Brandon McCoy, Systems Engineer Advisor supporting our Veeam Cloud and service providers. And today, brand new video. This one is all about single sign-on, specifically within the Veeam Service Provider Console. Now, there are a few different identity providers that you can use that integrate with Veeam for single sign-on. I have chosen to do Entra ID. That's probably the most popular, and that's the one that I have more familiarity with. So, the other ones that like Okta or an ADFS, if you're using those, a lot of the same things apply, but there may be some different values or formats for certain things that you enter in. So you may have to look through the documentation. There are examples for most of the popular ones. The one specifically for Entra ID is the one I used, and I'll make sure to post that Help Center guide in the description of the video. So got a few things to get through, so why don't we get started? So here we are in the Service Provider Console login screen, and before you set up single sign-on, you're not going to see an option listed here, right? So what we're going to do first is add our app registration in Azure, then you'll have the option. So first thing we're going to do is go ahead and log in with our normal credentials. Okay. And starting from the top here, I'm going to click on Configuration. I'm going to go to Security and then Single Sign-On. Okay, so if I click New here, and you can see the ones they've got Keycloak, Okta, ADFS. We're actually going to go to Custom. Again, this is for Entra, so obviously select the one that you're doing. So we'll do Custom. Okay, so the first thing that it's asking for, display name, identity provider, entity ID, what are all these things, right? So we're going to go to Entra ID and get some of this information. I've got both screens, our two tabs, kind of back to back, because there will be a lot of copying and pasting and moving back and forth, so that might make it easy for you as well. So here I am in Microsoft Azure, and I'm going to go to Entra ID. You can also shortcut, just look specifically for enterprise applications, and it'll take you right there. Okay, so I've got no enterprise applications at this time. What you're going to do is you're going to click New Application. Now, you'll be presented with this gallery to browse of different applications. Veeam is not in here, so what we're going to do is we're going to go create your own application. Now, you can call this whatever you want. It does need to be 5 characters. I learned that the hard way in take 1 of this video. So we'll just do, for me, I'm going to select VSPC for Veeam Service Provider Console _ app. I believe that's what they use in the example in the Help Center as well. And you're going to select this bottom option, integrate any other applications you don't find in the gallery. And we'll click Create. That's going to start creating the application. Okay, looks like we're moving pretty quick here. All right, so got a few things listed here. So the first thing we want to do is we want to go to Setup Single Sign-On. So let's click on Get Started. Now you do notice that the first thing says assign users and groups. We will do that too, but just kind of going in the order of what the Service Provider Console needs, we're going to start with number 2. So setting up single sign-on. Now we are using SAML as our protocol, right? That is the only option. So we'll select SAML. Okay, so you'll see these things right here. The first one got a couple requireds. We're going to grab that from the console. We're going to give some of the things listed here to the Service Provider Console. All right, so let's go back to the Service Provider Console real quick. Now for the display name, this is again whatever you want to call it. I'm going to stick to the same thing here and just do VSPC app. Now, this is the identity provider setting, so maybe this has to do with something in Azure or Entra, your naming conventions. They don't give us a lot of instructions on exactly what to specify here, so it's kind of up to you and just kind of what makes sense to you. It doesn't really matter what you put here. Nothing is technically incorrect, okay? And then down here, the client ID. So this is the app name we created on the previous screen. So we called the app VSPC app. So that's what we want to put here when we created the app in the first step. But we'll do that in lowercase, I believe. I don't know if it's case sensitive or not. But again, just to drive home the fact, this display name, maybe I make this say Entra ID or Azure or some other kind of thing that identifies this, okay? Now, it needs two things, and it also is going to give you two things. So the first two things it wants is the identity provider URL and the entity ID. So the identity provider URL can be found back in, I believe, section 2 right here. Or I'm sorry, section 3, SAML certificates. If you look for app federation metadata URL, we're going to copy this and we're going to drop that right here where it says identity provider URL. And then you've got entity ID. So entity ID is going to be on number 4, the Microsoft Entra identifier. Okay. So we'll put that right here. All right, next thing's next. So, service provider entity ID URL. Now, this is actually something that the console will generate for you. So let's go ahead and click Create. And let's also go ahead and create the assertion consumer URL. Okay. So this first one, the entity ID URL, copy that and drop that into this first option, entity ID identifier. So click Edit, and right here, identifier, entity ID, add identifier, paste. Okay, that's good. Reply URL, it's the second one, add. Let's go back to the console and grab that, copy, back over here, drop that in there, and we are good. Okay, you don't need to fill out anything else here. These optional things are a little beyond my pay grade, and it's not really talked about in the documentation. So, if you're an Entra ID wizard, I'm sure this stuff will make more sense to you. But let's go ahead and save this. We've got our basic configuration down. Okay, everything's good here for now. We're going to go back to the Service Provider Console. Everything's good on this section. Let's click Next. Okay, these are some advanced settings in terms of algorithms for signing and security. The documentation doesn't talk about this much either. I believe this is just, the levels of security that's acceptable for your signing strings. I'm just leaving this all as default. Again, this is kind of, if you're more advanced in this area, maybe you make some changes here. Veeam kind of just tells us to use the default settings here. So I'm going to click Next. If you have a certificate, you can browse and enter it into the console here. I'm going to have Veeam generate a self-signed certificate. So we'll just click Next. All the information right here. You may want to copy and put this somewhere safe. I'm going to click Finish. Now, you'll see this metadata file downloaded. I don't necessarily need that right now. It may be important later if you're recreating this and you want to reuse this and add that certificate in, but it is saved onto the console. You can see here it says that I have Entra ID identity provider. It's pending. There's no mapping rules. Provider type is custom, and we're using the SAML 2. So what do I need to do next? Well, if I click on this and I go to configuration here, there's a couple options. That download that file, which it already did for me. I can test the login. Now, this isn't going to work just yet, so let's hold off on this section. And instead, what I want to do is I want to go to roles and users. Okay? Now, one important thing to note here is that in this video, I am creating a single sign-on for the portal administrator. The portal administrator is the highest level of the service provider console. It gives all access to all companies, full on God mode. This can be a security risk, and you always want to implement the principle of least privilege when you're creating roles. So as I'm doing this video, I'm doing the easy button, just making myself a portal administrator because that's what I am. But if you're doing this for a user, maybe as a portal operator, somebody who only has permissions to a specific company, or maybe even like a reader who can only see things, or for a specific user, you need to think about the person that you're assigning, what role that you're assigning them, what permissions come with that role, okay? So again, for me, I'm doing the portal administrator. Now I'm going to need a few things. I already know this, so let's go ahead and go back to Entra ID, and let me go back. I will be in the attributes and claims right here, okay? And so I want to edit this, okay? Now the first thing I want to change is this top one, this claim name, okay? So let's click on this, and you'll leave the name identifier format as email address, and where it says source attribute, you're going to change this to user.mail, okay? And click Save. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new claim. And so for this name, we're going to be doing the company that this is for. This is for my company as the service provider. And my company name is actually US Demo Lab. That's what it's listed as. But just for ease of use here, I'm going to just put Veeam. And as long as I put this same name in the service provider console, I'll show you where to do that. As long as those two match, then that's fine. Okay, so from the source attribute, let's type user.company name. Okay, so I've got user.company name. Name is Veeam. Let's save. Okay, you can create additional claims as needed. There's all kinds of the ones that you can add, nickname, telephone number, and that's based on the users and the groups that you specify in Entra ID, which we'll get to in a moment. We haven't assigned or created the users in Entra ID that have permissions to log on to the service provider console with single sign-on, right? And that's what we're doing now. We're creating these mapping rules and then creating users that have these rules, okay? So let's go back to the service provider console. Let's create a new mapping rule. There's different rules for different rules for roles, right? So this is going to be called portal admin rule, and you can put a description in there if you need to. Okay. Now notice here, it starts with portal operator, and it says portal operator can perform full management for companies in the specified scope. So this limits to which companies you can do, and you'll see in this next tab, it'll ask me what companies. I'm going to switch to portal administrator. You'll notice that companies go away because, again, this is the highest level, and it's for all companies across the board. So make sure you understand which role you're assigning here to which user. So we'll click Next. Now the conditions of this user that need to be matched in the console. So specify claim name from the identity provider that will contain your company name, right? And that's that claim that we added. Remember, I put Veeam, and I could have put US Demo Lab, but again, I just want to call this Veeam as my rule. The user is assigned to that company name, or it will be in Entra ID, and so that's fine. Additional mappings here for that selected user, maybe for different values. So you can add more in here, like I mentioned. I'm just going to leave this as is. Okay, we'll click Next, and we'll click Finish. Okay, now I've got an app registration with the all the information that's needed from the service provider console, the URLs, and the display names. I've got my attributes and claims that are mapped to the rules in the service provider console. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to go back to Entra ID. Right now I'm in attributes and claims. Let's go back, And let's go to users and groups. Remember, this is that first option I told you we'd get back to. Okay. Now it says no application assignments found. So what I want to do is I want to add user groups. Now, a quick note here. In production, you'll want to use groups. You do have to have the appropriate licenses in Entra. It's probably like a P1 license. I'm just using a free account. I don't have that kind of ability here, so I just have to do individual users. You got to think about this at scope. You know, if I have 500 users, it's going to be hard to create an individual user. I did this for everyone on my team. There was like, I don't know, like less than 10 of us, but still, it was kind of a pain. So you'd want to use a group, and then every user in that group is applied to here, right? And that's kind of some 101 in Entra ID. So let's go to users. Now, this is me, Brandon McCoy at Veeam.com. I'm actually going to assign this to every user. These are all the people that are on our team. And I created these users ahead of time. So you have to create these users, or they have to exist in Entra ID in order for you to add them to the permissions of this application. And then when a user logs into the Service Provider Console using single sign-on, they're going to check that they are added into that application, and so that they'll have the rules available to be the portal administrator. So again, I know I'm stressing this point, but it's important. Every user that I'm adding to this mapping rule is a portal administrator. I would need different rules if I wanted to give them different types of permissions. Okay. All right. So that's all my users. Actually, I think I'm missing one of my guys. He might be sad that I left him out, but I'll add him back in. All right. So I've got my users that I want to be portal administrators. I'm going to click add. Now I'm assigning all of those users. All of those users are under the company Veeam attribute, and they all have emails. Now, let me go into one of these users, and I want to show you some of the things you can do. This is kind of Entra ID stuff, but still I think it, oops, maybe that's not where it is. Let's click on this user. And let's go to the properties. And so, you know, I can add all kinds of other stuff here. Job information. I've got portal administrator for company name, US Demo Lab. Right, so just some extra stuff. Again, kind of some Entra ID stuff, but just wanted to show it to you while I'm here. Okay, so we're pretty much done here. I'm going to go back to security, my single sign-on, pending. Let's test this out and see if it works. Okay, now I've noticed this every time I've set this up. I get this error message the first time I do it, but then if I do it again, it goes away. So you may have to do that the first time. It may just not have refreshed. I'm not exactly sure why it does that. But let's actually just here. Let's confirm something. Go to configuration, security. Let's just try it again. All right, we are in. It is now configured. Just to drive the point home, I'm going to log out. And you see now that I do have that option, log in with single sign-on. So let's click it again. And boom, we are in. All of the other people on my team, except that one guy, sorry Marty, have access to the Service Provider Console. When they log in by clicking that button, they will all be portal administrators. Now, I am already logged in to my Entra, so that's why it didn't, ask for anything additional. If you're not logged in, like any of my guys on the team that log in with the single sign-on button for the first time, they're of course going to be prompted to enter their MFA. They may even have to add me as their Azure AD. It depends on whether they're already in my Entra or not, but they'll need to, add their Microsoft MFA and log in, and then from then on out, they'll just log in automatically to the console. So that's it for this video. I hope you found it informative. It was a lot of fun, a lot of kind of trial and error. But if you just look through the documentation, take your time, use Google, ChatGPT, whatever you got to do. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out, leave a message. The link to the Help Center with the specific example will be listed. There's also examples for Okta and Keycloak and ADFS. So until next time, keep on Veeaming in the free world.